Today on Alex Nautos, we're out here taking a look at the 2015 Toyota Sienna. There is also a video on the 2014 Toyota Sienna on my channel if you're looking for that one instead. I'm taking a look at the Sienna again for a variety of different reasons. The first one is the refreshed interior. The second reason is because I have a video on the Kia Sedona and I will have a video on the Honda Odyssey coming up very soon. The last reason is because I have received a positive flood of emails lately asking about three-row crossovers, three-row SUVs, and specifically 8-passenger three-row crossovers. The number one question has been, what is the most comfortable and most spacious three-row 8-passenger crossover available? And the answer really is the Toyota Sienna. More on that later. The exterior changes on the Sienna really are quite minor. We have slightly different headlamps, a few different changes to the grille and the fog lamp areas, but nothing substantial has changed on the outside. That means we still have this very flowing design language, which is more car-like than Toyota truck-like. So this does not look like the Toyota Highlander, even though in many ways the Highlander and the Sienna are related. At 200.2 inches long, the Sienna is just about a foot longer than the 191-inch long Toyota Highlander. This is obviously one of the larger vehicles available on the market, but you can find three-row crossovers that are nearly this size. General Motors Lambda triplets are very, very large three-row crossovers, but they don't have the kind of room and practicality going on in your average minivan. That's really what you're buying a minivan for. My eagle-eyed viewers will no doubt notice that I am sporting a spare tire on this Sienna, and that's because I did have a flat tire. It had nothing to do with the Toyota, it had to do with the road conditions, but the spare tire is an important thing that we'll cover a little bit later. The key difference between your average minivan and your average three-row crossover is that we have a very boxy profile. So the roofline continues high all the way across the back, and we also have a floor that is a little bit lower than your average crossover. Ground clearance in this vehicle is 6.5 inches. You compare that to the Highlander. Highlander is 8 inches. It's only about a 1.5 inch difference. But the Highlander is only 68 inches tall and this is 78 inches tall. So we get 10 inches more height to the vehicle, and that's also right down here at the floor as well. Height is obviously very important, but this is also a little bit wider than the Highlander. That means we get wider seats in the back, a little bit more room for 3 people across the rear bench seats. Most importantly, we have nearly twice the cargo room in the Sienna that we do in that Highlander. It's about 70 cubic feet larger in this vehicle than in Toyota's three-row crossover. You'll find that a lot of that increased cargo area comes from this tailgate hatch, which is very vertical. It's very different than you'll find in most crossovers, even your average three-row crossover. And if we open this rear tailgate hatch, which has been lightly restyled for the 2015 model year, you'll notice we have a much larger opening than in your average three-row crossover as well. Now, unlike some of those three-row crossovers out there, this larger tailgate means that you can bop your head on it if you're a taller person. I do have to duck down just a little bit in order to go under that tailgate. The biggest change for the back end in 2015 are these new tail lamp modules, which are now silver and have red LEDs inside. Like your average three-row crossover, we have a V6 under this hood, but unlike your average crossover, there is no base 4-cylinder engine, so it's V6 all the way. This is a 3.5-liter V6 engine, produces 266 horsepower and 245 pound-feet of torque. That is a little bit lower than you'll find in the Toyota Highlander. The engine is mated only to a 6-speed automatic transaxle, and we have the option of all-wheel drive, which is very, very unique for a minivan in this segment, as Chrysler no longer offers all-wheel drive on their minivans. This is essentially the same all-wheel drive system that you find in the Toyota Highlander, so in terms of all-wheel drive system capability, they're approximately equal. Fuel economy comes in at 18 miles per gallon city, 25 highway, 21 combined if you get the front-wheel drive version, and you drop that down to 19 miles per gallon combined if you get the all-wheel drive. That is a little bit lower than you'll find in the Toyota Highlander because this is a bigger vehicle. It's more square, it's a little bit wider, it's a little bit taller, it's also a little bit heavier, but it does get relatively similar mileage, all things considered. Before we dive right into the seat comfort scores, let me just say that I'm comparing minivans and three-row crossovers together because there aren't very many minivans in the United States to choose from, but there are a lot of three-row crossovers and there's a great deal of cross-shop between them. When it comes to front seat comfort, I'll give the Sienna 8 out of 10 points. We do have a multi-way adjustable driver's seat in our particular model with a 2-way lumbar support, manually adjustable front shoulder belts, and a 2-way adjustable front headrest. The Sienna has the traditional minivan advantage of having a very tall ceiling, even though we have the sunroof in our particular model. It means I can have a much more upright seating position than your average three-row crossover. However, the front seat is not quite as adjustable as some of those three-row crossovers, and the tilt telescoping steering column doesn't have quite the same range of motion. Larger three-row crossovers have a little bit more front seat comfort than this, specifically the Toyota Highlander, the Honda Pilot, or the Nissan Pathfinder. You'll also find slightly more comfortable front seats in the brand new Kia Sedona. Second row comfort varies from 8 out of 10 points to 10 out of 10 points depending on the version of the Sienna that you get. Our particular model is the 8-passenger model. That means we have a somewhat uncomfortable center seat, which we'll go over in a little bit, but we do have these very comfortable outboard bucket seats. If you get the top-end Sienna, then we also get ottomans, and the seats move in a few different ways as well. The overall exterior profile of the minivan makes these second row seats more comfortable than you'll find in your average 3-row crossover as well. We have an awful lot more headroom here than you'd find in even those larger 3-row crossovers out there. The top-end Sienna ties with the top-end Sedona in having lounge chairs that also have an integrated ottoman that allow you to stretch out a little bit more. You will find a tiny bit more legroom in the Kia Sedona, but you don't get the 8th seat in the middle, and that's because in the Kia Sedona, those outboard seats do move inward a little bit and then move back even further, so that way they're positioned right back there between the rear wheel wells. That gives you a little bit more legroom in the second row. As I said, the Sienna that we're testing is an 8-passenger model, which means we get this removable middle seat in the second row. It is separately foldable from the outboard seat, so you can fold it down right like that, but you can also remove it completely from the vehicle. There's a little latch right here under the seat bottom cushion that allows you to completely detach it from the vehicle, right like that, and then you can store it in the back. The seat cushion is quite thin. It also has a headrest that's very low, and it's very narrow as well. In addition, these outboard seats have these fold-down armrests, and you can really see if you put those down how narrow this center seat is. Before I move into the third row, there's some important considerations when you're comparing this second row to the competition's second row. These are very comfortable seats, but they're also removable from the vehicle, and in the brand new Kia Sedona, you can't remove those second row seats from the vehicle. These are considerably more comfortable than the Chrysler seats in the Town & Country or in the Dodge Caravan. The reason for that is Chrysler's stow-and-go system. Those stow-and-go seats, in order to have them fold into the floor, you trade comfort for practicality, so you really need to decide which is better for you. Getting in and out of the third row is fairly easy. We have a handle right here that helps you slide this seat all the way forward like that to get into the back. You can also collapse the seat in a slightly different mechanism right there like that. The bottom cushion folds up and then that slides forward. This does allow you to get into the back if you have a child seat in place, because you can just scoot the seat all the way forward and get into the back a little bit more easily. This is obviously more convenient than your average 3-row crossover because we have a much larger door opening right here than you'll find in a regular hinged door. The third row really is the reason to buy a minivan over a 3-row crossover, because there's no 3-row crossover out there with the kind of headroom that we're getting in this vehicle. Even the Nissan Pathfinder or General Motors large crossovers don't have this kind of room. If you don't want a minivan but you want this kind of third row room, you're going to be stuck with very expensive options like the Suburban, the Yukon, the Escalade, or vehicles along those lines. They still won't have quite as much room in the back or quite as much cargo room depending on how you fold the seats. When it comes to third row comfort, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points. 10 out of 10 points does go to the current generation Honda Odyssey in my book. These are slightly more comfortable than you'll find in the Chrysler minivans. They're also a little bit more comfortable than the Kia Sedona. When it comes to installing child seats, there is a separate video on that, so you can go ahead and click on that banner on the side of your screen and be taken on over to that video. But very quickly, there are 4 sets of latch anchors in this Sienna. Outboard seating positions in the second row have latch anchors and top tether anchors. Back here in the third row, we have latch anchors in this 40 portion of the 60/40 folding rear seat back, and then latch anchors across this 60 section. So if you do use the latch anchors in this 60 section to install a child seat, you can't put an additional person because the latch anchors go right here, sort of between the center position and the outboard seating position in the third row seat. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'll give this 10 out of 10 points. We have over 150 cubic feet of storage space in the back of the Sienna, which is absolutely enormous. This is easily 50-60 cubic feet larger than you'll find in your average 3-row crossover. This is also more cargo room than you'll find in your average full-size SUV. This is an awful lot of cargo room, and it's all allowed by this really deep cargo well that I'm sitting in right now. That's where the rear seats go. So if I hop out of this rear area, you'll notice the major innovation in minivans in the last few years has been this rear seat folding arrangement where they actually drop right down there level with the load floor. This low load floor means that this is one of the only vehicles where you can actually put 8 people in the vehicle at the same time and probably about 5 or 6 people's worth of luggage for a weekend away. That's just not possible in any of those 3-row crossovers out there. This rear cargo room is made possible because this is a minivan and not a crossover. Since crossovers are slightly concerned with approach and departure angles, they don't have this kind of room in the back. We also have this room possible because the exhaust system of the vehicle is routed a little bit interestingly in the Sienna, and that allows you to have this deep storage well in the back. They actually put the spare tire on the passenger side of the vehicle under the side door. This is where we get to the spare tire. As you can see, I have it on this vehicle because I did have a flat tire. Normally the spare is located right here in the middle of the vehicle under the floor. You do have to sort of winch it down and then drag it out from under the vehicle and then put it on the car. But most importantly, this minivan actually has one. If you get the all-wheel drive system in the Sienna, this is again the only minivan available with all-wheel drive, then you lose the spare tire. The reason the spare tire is deleted in the all-wheel drive Sienna is because there's simply nowhere for it to go. The all-wheel drive system caused an exhaust system change, and the exhaust system now has the muffler over here on this side of the vehicle, exactly where the spare tire would need to be located. That does mean you still get the cargo practicality in the back. You don't lose any of that for the all-wheel drive system. You just cannot get the spare tire. Starting our interior tour in the rear cabin area, we have sun visors for the third row passengers in our particular model and an additional storage cubby right back here. Well, you'll notice that plastics on the front of the cabin have really improved over the 2014 model. The back of the cabin still has a lot of hard touch plastics going on. Second row passengers get height adjustable seatbelts for the outboard seating positions, and again we have sunshades in the side on our model. To keep your rear passengers happy, we have a split screen infotainment system, or you can use it as one wide screen. And if we move on over to this side of the cabin, our particular model has the 3-zone climate control system. 2015 brings Toyota's Driver Easy Speak system, which was launched on the 2014 Highlander, to the Sienna. The system is sort of a one-way speakerphone system. It uses the same microphone that the Bluetooth speakerphone interface uses up front to act as sort of an intercom in the vehicle, sending that driver's voice back here to the rear speakers in the vehicle. It makes it a lot easier for the rear passengers to hear the driver. It's not a two-way system, however, so you can't talk back to the driver. It's really just a one-way conversation. Rear passengers will find the video inputs for that rear seat entertainment system, a 120-volt power inverter, and cup holders right there in the back of the center console. The biggest change for 2015 is in this front cabin area that we'll scan across first. You can see this is a huge departure from the 2014 model, which suffered from an awful lot of hard plastics and definitely dated shapes. The driver and the front passenger get height adjustable seatbelts and two-way adjustable headrests that I mentioned earlier. There's a new soft touch armrest with faux stitching going on right here, and the upper portion of this door is a soft touch plastic as well. It's not quite as soft as the armrest. You will find harder touch plastics lower in the door panel down there towards the bottle holder and the speaker grill. Moving on over to the dashboard, we have this all new style, but we still have the dual glove box that the previous Sienna had. So this lid, which is now a soft touch plastic, it's basically the same plastic that you find on the armrest on the doors, opens up to reveal a fairly large glove box right there up top. You will find hard touch plastics above that and below that in the dashboard. 2 large air vents and a new trim strip right here, and you'll find a very large bin style glove box right below it. Moving across the dashboard, we now have Toyota's latest audio systems available in the Sienna. If we turn off the vehicle, you'll notice that it's a single piece of plastic right across the front, which gives it a very clean look. Go ahead and start it again. So you can see that these buttons are touch buttons and they appear right there as you turn the display on. Direct access buttons to audio, apps, your home screen, seek forward, backward, and your phone button right over there. If you want to know more about Toyota's latest Entune systems, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to a video on them. We have our shifter right here in the dashboard, down for drive, across for sport, up for up, and down for the manual shift mode. On the lower right side of your screen, our model has the 3-zone automatic climate control system. We do have a sync button to very easily sync all 3 zones. Very logically laid out, temperature knobs for driver, passenger, and rear temperature, rear mode, rear enable, disable, fan speed, etc. Below the climate controls, you'll find the USB and auxiliary input, heated seat controls in our particular model, 12-volt power port, some fold-out cup holders that augment these built-in cup holders in the center console. Our particular model also has a Blu-ray player for that rear seat entertainment system. The USB port worked very well with my iDevices. I have an iPhone 6 connected right here. One thing that I do dislike about this USB port is that it's not hidden away in some cubby somewhere, so it is hanging out for everybody to see. 2 front cup holders are very large and easy to use. These pop-out cup holders are a little bit smaller, but I was still able to accommodate this large takeout drink. Between the dashboard and the cup holders, we have a storage area right here. It has a lip around it to help keep things like purses from sliding around. Between the 2 front seats, we have a storage area with a lip on it again, and a rubber mat to help keep things from sliding around. Easily able to accommodate phones, keys, that sort of thing. If we open up the lid, we have an enormous storage compartment, very easily able to accommodate a gallon of milk and a bunch of other items. The size of the center console is partially made possible by these armrests that are not part of the center console. They're independent on the driver and the front passenger seat. Over on the driver's side, we have an all-new instrument cluster that's much more attractive than the outgoing model. We have a tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right, fuel gauge and engine temperature below them, and then we have this large multi-information display right there in between them. The multi-function display is controlled via this joystick button on the steering wheel, up, down, side to side, click down to enter, change page button, and a back button. The multi-information display is very similar to other Toyota products. We have our trip computer displays right there, distance, fuel economy, etc. We have a navigation display. If navigation was active, it would give us turn-by-turn directions on here. We also have a media interface display right there. We can press the button and select different sources with this interface. It's a little bit more interactive than you'll see some of them out there. You can move over to vehicle messages, and then lastly, we have vehicle settings as well. The steering wheel is a 3-spoke design. We have small sport grips right up here, leather wrap in our particular model. The airbag cover is a faux leather wrap model. It is injection molded, but it does have the faux leather stitching going on right there. The button module I showed you over on the right. On the left, we have the radio controls, track up, down, mode, voice command button, volume up, down. We also have dedicated phone hang-up and pickup buttons. And like most Toyota products, you'll find the cruise control right over here on a stalk. Across the top of the driver's section, we do have soft touch plastics, but you will still find a great deal of hard touch plastics below that portion in the dashboard. That's not necessarily unusual. Most minivans do have a lot of hard touch plastics, but the brand new Kia Sedona has a few more soft touch bits than this model. Over on the driver's left, we have a row of blank buttons, and we also have a small storage cubby with a change holder, power door enable disable button that disables both the power rear hatch as well as the side doors. If you're trying to decide between the front-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive versions of the Sienna, I strongly recommend that you take an all-wheel drive version out for a long test drive first. That's important because I didn't find too many all-wheel drive Siennas on the local dealer lots near me, and the all-wheel drive version does handle and feel a little bit differently than the regular version. A lot of the difference is down to the run-flat tires that the all-wheel drive version uses, because we can't put a spare tire in the vehicle because it won't fit right back there. They use run-flat tires. Run-flat tires allow you to drive safely at lower speeds up to about 100 miles without any air in the tires. Of course, keep in mind that if you do that, you can't expect the tire to be repairable once you're done, because if you do choose to just run on those flat tires, then that tire will be basically destroyed after 100 miles. The all-wheel drive system obviously reduces torque steer in this vehicle, but it also makes the car feel a little bit more sure-footed. So when you floor this car around a corner, you don't get that peeling out that you do in this front-wheel drive version. Run-flat tires in general are a little bit stiffer than non-run-flat tires. That also causes a little bit of a difference when it comes to the ride as well as the handling score in the vehicle. You can expect the ride score to drop just a little bit, and you can expect the handling score to improve a little bit. When it comes to acceleration, I'll give this 8 out of 10 points. I scored 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds in this front-wheel drive model and 7 seconds in the all-wheel drive model because it is a little bit heavier. In terms of 0 to 60 acceleration time, that is very similar to the rest of the minivans out there. You will find three-row crossovers that accelerate faster than this, however. Kia Sedona feels a little bit peppier thanks to the transmission gearing and the way that it's been tuned by Kia. The Chrysler minivans accelerate very well for their size, even though they're a little bit heavier than this. When it comes to handling, I'll give this 7 out of 10 points. A lot of people mistakenly assume that minivans handle worse than three-row crossovers, and that's just not true. In general, the average minivan will actually handle a little bit better than the average three-row crossover. The reason is because we have a lower center of gravity, and typically we have lower profile tires, more car-like tires, even though we have a suspension that is sometimes a little bit softer than your average three-row crossover. The lower center of gravity and the overall suspension design means that this has less body roll than you'll find in the Highlander. When it comes to braking, I'll give this 6 out of 10 points. In general, minivans seem to have smaller brakes than comparable three-row crossovers. And that's what's going on in this Sienna. It doesn't brake quite as confidently as the Toyota Highlander, and braking fade resistance isn't quite as good either. When compared with the rest of the minivan pack, the Sienna is right there in with the thick of the competition. Something along the lines of a Mazda 5 would obviously be the better handling and better braking minivan. However, the Mazda 5 is considerably smaller than this. I'll give the ride 9 out of 10 points in the front-wheel drive model, 8 out of 10 points in the all-wheel drive model, again thanks to those run-flat tires that the all-wheel drive version gets. As with most vehicles that are designed to carry large numbers of people or large amounts of cargo, you will find that the ride improves the more people you put in the car. When it comes to cabin noise, I rang in at 69 decibels up front, 71 decibels in the third row. That gives us a cabin noise score of 9 out of 10 points. This is definitely one of the quietest three-row vehicles that you can get. The only things that are going to be quieter than this would be the luxury-oriented vehicles or those full-size SUVs. Fuel economy is an area where most three-row vehicles let us down, and the Sienna is no exception. I've been averaging 20.5 miles per gallon in this front-wheel drive model, and I averaged 19.5 miles per gallon in the last all-wheel drive model that I tested. That's not too unusual when it comes to three-row crossover vehicles, however, because this is about the same as you'll find in entries like the Sorento, the Highlander, etc. You will find better fuel economy in the Honda Odyssey because it does have a slightly more advanced fuel management system with its cylinder deactivation technology. Toyota has kept pricing fairly simple for the Sienna for the 2015 model year, although things do range from the average in this segment to one of the most expensive vehicles you can get in the minivan segment. The LE starts at $28,600 and now includes standard features like a 6.1-inch color touchscreen infotainment system and 3-zone standard climate control. The LE model bumps things up to $31,300. The Limited starts at $41,650, giving you unique features in the back like the dual sunroofs. We also get center seats with integrated ottomans. If you fully load your all-wheel drive Limited up, you'll end up at $47,430. When you're comparing this to the competition, it is important to keep in mind that we do have standard features on here that you don't find in some of the competitors, like that standard 3-zone automatic climate control, that 6.1-inch LCD infotainment system, and the standard 8-seat configuration. Even given those, however, the Dodge Caravan is significantly less expensive at $21,395. It is the least expensive minivan by far in the United States. Obviously, that inexpensive Caravan is not going to have the same kind of feature content that we get on this in the base form, but even when you adjust for the feature content, the Caravan is significantly less expensive. We also get a V6 engine in that vehicle, a 6-speed automatic transmission, front-wheel drive, but that base model is 7 passengers only. And in fact, there is no 8-passenger version of the Caravan anymore, so all those models of the Caravan are all 7 passengers. The Caravan is not expected to get a redesign until the 2016 model year, when we will see an all-new Caravan and possibly a Town & Country. We're not quite sure whether one of those models is going away or not. The Caravan is unquestionably the highest value in this segment, but it's also one of the more practical entries because we get the stow-and-go second-row seats. You can fold those completely in the floor whenever you want. That means that you don't have to take these seats out and have them clutter up your garage if you don't use them very often, or you can carry 7 passengers one day and then the next moment just go to your home improvement store and for some reason buy a whole lot of patio furniture, be able to jam it in the vehicle and take it home without worrying about what you do with these seats. Obviously, the counterpoint to that, however, is we have the least comfortable second-row seats in that Caravan just because of the nature of those folding seats. Honda's Odyssey has long been considered the Sienna's toughest competitor for very good reason. They're relatively similarly priced. The Odyssey is a little bit more expensive. They're both 8-passenger vehicles, and they both span the standard entry to the luxury entry in this segment. Key things to know about the Sienna versus the Odyssey, however, are that the 8-passenger version of the Odyssey is only available EX trims and above, whereas the base version of this is available in the 8-passenger form. That means if you're after the least expensive 8-passenger minivan, the Sienna is definitely in the running. However, that 8th passenger in the Odyssey is going to be significantly more comfortable than the Sienna because it is more of a real 8th seat than this temporary removable seat that we get in this vehicle. The Odyssey is also a little bit more child seat friendly with a few more latch anchors than we get in the Sienna. We have a little bit more room inside as well. Since the Sienna's refresh this year mainly focused on the inside, the Odyssey is a little bit fresher overall because it received an interior and an exterior refresh very recently. We also get higher fuel economy thanks to some of the fuel-saving technologies that Honda has passed down into the minivan under the hood. Of course, as I said, you will pay for that because the Odyssey is a little bit more expensive than the Sienna. Nissan's Quest is less expensive than the Sienna at $26,530, but it's also less practical than the Sienna because we don't have an 8-passenger version. It's also smaller. That smaller size translates into about 40 cubic feet of less space on the inside for carrying widgets or people around. You do get slightly better fuel economy thanks to that CVT under the hood, but it's not quite as reliable in terms of repair history as the Sienna has been. I saved my trickiest comparisons for last. The Kia Sedona is my favorite minivan in this segment. Of course, I have a little asterisk after that because the Honda Odyssey ties with it in some ways. The Kia Sedona is really trying to be more of the crossover themed minivan in this segment, and it does result in a distinct loss of practicality on the inside. We got second row seats that are not removable in that Sedona. We also don't get all-wheel drive available, which means that even though it looks more like a crossover on the inside and on the outside, it's not quite as practical off-road as this vehicle. Thanks to a slightly lower curb weight, an engine that produces more power, and slightly lower transmission gearing, the Sedona feels an awful lot peppier out on the road than the Sienna. And now we must circle back around to the average 3-row crossover, and I'm going to use the Toyota Highlander as an example, but it's pretty much the same for every 3-row crossover out there. The Highlander and the Sienna are very closely related vehicles. They're both front-wheel drive based vehicles based on some of Toyota's standard parts. That would be the engine, transmission, suspension designs, etc. are very similar when you compare the Highlander to the Sienna. The Highlander, however, costs about $3,000 more. It is definitely more handsome on the outside, both in the front, the side, and the rear profiles. However, it's an awful lot less practical. We get about 70 cubic feet less storage space on the inside. That's about half the size, significantly reduced third row passenger area. I can actually sit upright in the third row in the Sienna, not have my hair touching the ceiling, have my feet flat on the floor, and have reasonable comfort in the back. I could definitely do the Sienna's third row seat for a few hours if I had to. I could probably do it for a road trip from San Francisco to Los Angeles if I needed to. More importantly, however, when that third row is in place, there is enough storage space in the back for a family of 7 that packs light to be able to go on that weekend trip to Los Angeles. The biggest difference between this and your average three-row crossover really would be ground clearance. This has 1.5 inches to 2 inches less ground clearance than you'll find in something like a Pathfinder, a Highlander, etc. However, we get basically the same all-wheel drive system in this that you get in your average three-row crossover, and I would posit if you need more than 6 inches of ground clearance, you probably need something more than a crossover anyway. This does just fine on gravel roads, dirt roads, lightly rutted roads. It also does fine on snow, gravel, and sand. My bottom line is if you're shopping for a three-row crossover and you actually care about third-row practicality, third-row comfort, and cargo area in the back, which presumably is the reason you're looking at a three-row crossover, you really need to give the Toyota Sienna, especially the all-wheel drive version of the Sienna, a look. I know the Sienna is still a minivan, and I share some of your reservations. I am a child of the 70s, so I remember growing up in the 1980s when the minivan came out and every mom wanted one. Trouble is, all the reasons that moms wanted one in the 1980s still apply right now in the 21st century, because we get an awful lot more room on the inside, an awful lot more practicality, and it still drives more like a car than your average crossover. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Toyota Sienna. You really ought to give one a look. Trust me on this one. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen to be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at Twitter as Alex and Autos, over at Facebook as Alex and Autos as well. And you can always email your questions to alex@alexandautos.com. I'll see you next week.